A few years ago, after my grandmother and grandfather had both passed away, and death weighed heavily on her mind, my mother told us that when it was her time, she wanted her body to be cremated or donated to science. My father, sister, and I cringed. We imagined scientists poking and prodding the woman we loved. We knew she would be dead, but could she feel it anyway? Would it hurt her? Even with enough education to understand what a cell was and what scientists do in labs, it was still scary to picture my mother on a cold metal slab surrounded by strangers in white lab coats. I cannot begin to imagine what the family members of Henrietta Lacks, the woman behind the Immortal HeLa cells, felt when they learned that her cells lived on and were used by scientists every day. Henrietta's daughter, Deborah, was consumed with the idea that researchers had done horrible things to her mother. Scientists would excitedly tell her that her mother's cells had gone into space and had been blown up by the H-bomb. Though the thoughts I had of my mother were frightening to me, at least I was fortunate enough to have information and a choice. The Lacks family was not given either.
The story began in January of 1951, when Henrietta was diagnosed with cervical cancer. She was treated with radium at Johns Hopkins, but there was no stopping the aggressive cancer. Henrietta died that October, leaving behind a husband and 5 children. But neither Henrietta nor her children knew that Dr. George Guy, a researcher at Hopkins, had been given a sample of one of Henrietta's tumors. At the time, cells Guy gathered from other patients would die shortly after they were harvested, but Henrietta's cells multiplied like crazy, giving birth to the cell line HeLa. The cells were commercialized and have since generated millions of dollars in profits. But the Lacks family never benefited financially from the sale of HeLa cells. While Henrietta is long dead, her children and grandchildren still struggle to get medical and health care. Ideas about informed consent have changed over the last 60 years, but journalist Rebecca Skloot points out that most patients today don't have any more control over removed body parts than Henrietta Lacks did. People often sign the informed consent forms without thinking about them. Scientists often argue that since the cells taken from Henrietta were generated through natural biological processes that had nothing to do with her personal agency, and because the cells were used to benefit countless others, it was perfectly acceptable for her cells to be taken. Some raise the point that developing a system to pay royalties to donors would simply be too complicated. But science is complicated. Perhaps some time and energy should be put into helping the families who help science.